Hey everyone, welcome to the conference. And I am actually coming to you, I'm an American coming to you live from Australia at this moment, where it is now, Lord knows, 1:04 in the afternoon on Wednesday, believe it or not. So looking forward to this presentation. Why don't we just go ahead and get started? I'm just going to just turn off my camera just for a little bit so I don't distract myself here. But I am Robin Cabral. I own Development Consulting Solutions, which is a small boutique consulting firm in the Northeast United States and in Australia. I'm a certified fundraising executive. I have a master's in philanthropy and fund development from St. Mary's University of Minnesota. And I'm also a member, MFIA. Someone asked me that today. What is MFIA? Member of the Fundraising Institute of Australia. Look them up, really great group. Been about 27 years working for and with nonprofits and all this fun stuff. So blah, 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 blah. For those of you in Australia, my cell phone and Australian website is there. But if you're in America or in Canada, you can look at my regular website, which is just the same one without the .au at the end. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at taking a multi-channeled approach to donor communications. What does that mean? How do we actually use some for-profit techniques such as lead magnets and customer sales maps to acquire new donors? How do we align all of this to create what I call a cohesive donor journey? And how do we actually build meaningful, timely touch points? That's a tongue twister for me. And then how do we track and measure all of this to justify an investment of resources into digital and multi-channeled and donor lead magnet acquisition? So as part of this, after the seminar here, the conference, you will get a lot of great resources from me that you can use in your work. But feel free, because I am watching the chat box, to type in any questions that you may have as we go along. And if I feel that we have time, I'll just kind of answer them as we go along. So feel free to type that in. So what is a multi-channeled approach to donor communications, right? What does that consist of? That is about having what I call an integrated approach that targets both offline and online. Sometimes when we think about multi-channel, we only think about digital multi-channel, like video and online emails and social media. But this is about creating the whole, approach, both offline and online, from in-person to telephone to all of that, using both direct and indirect channels. So a multi-channel approach could consist of, such as here in Australia and in the UK, although it's just making a comeback in Australia, is face-to-face fundraising, like street fundraising, direct mail, email, right? Social media, targeted ads. How many of you out there actually use targeted ads in your multi-channel approach? Just type in yes or no into the chat box. And then even your website, creating landing pages is part of a multi-channeled approach. Yes, I see a yes. Is that Toby saying yes? So what else consists of that? Google Ads or social? Actually, both, right? So you can type in yes or no. Peer-to-peer fundraising is part of that multi-channeled. Corporate partnerships, part of that multi-channeled. And even Australia here, traditional marketing. Folks are still using, how many out there of you are using television, radio ads, telephone, that is huge here. Huge here in Australia, which is not so much in the United States, particularly for small to mid-sized not-for-profits. We're not taking out ads and those kinds of things. Text or short messaging, SMS, like who knew that's what SMS stood for, right? And then we have electronic direct mails, video. Okay, I use a lot of video messaging in my clients' work and recommend it, video acknowledgments, those kinds of things. And then we have multimedia, MMS versus SMS. That's the multimedia of text messaging, right? Woo, that's a big list, right? So why a multi-channel approach? Because what we know is years ago when I was growing up, it was a push kind of world. Like you just had one medium. How many of you out there remember like 3 channels on TV every night? 6, 10, and 12. Go amen, right? Like how many of you remember that? Today, each of us has our own content channel. For heaven's sakes, I have a YouTube channel, right? I'm producing content on. So we know that consumers are in control of the channels. Wendy, I was the human remote control as a child. I know the feeling. Get up and turn the dial, will you? So today there's so much information, and now we are the ones who are pushing content out there, and consumers, donors can choose what it is that they're listening to, right? And the fact that there are so many, how many of us have like more than one device? We have our iPad, we have our cell phone, we have, you name it, our Apple TV, whatever. We can get information just about on any kind of device these days. And what we do know is that savvy prospective donors are going online and looking for causes that align with their passion and their values. That hasn't changed. Donors are always looking for alignment between vision and values. So let's see here. Amina, I hope I'm saying your name right. Google Ads, okay, yes, but not great traction. Hopefully today, after today, you'll get greater traction. Wendy saying yes, Yelp, Google, Facebook, radio. Woohoo, Wendy, you go. That is multi-channeled. Let's see, both ads and PR. And someone here says they're exploring mobile giving, but keen to hear more about mobile giving versus mobile donations. And then let's see here. As also, our audience is more Gen X. Why? What's working for millennials? I come from corporate, so this is my first year in nonprofit as a full-time job. All right. So why? What we do know is that there are definite benefits to having a diversified marketing approach, because evidence suggests that a multi-channel, and I'm going to show you the stats in just a second, can significantly, no pun intended for Wendy, who was the human remote control as a child, can significantly move the dial in donor revenue. It's going to open you up to, having a diversified marketing approach is going to open you up to new sources of revenue, as well as improve or deepen the current donor relationships that you presently have. And certainly, this is going to require collaboration amongst multidisciplinary teams within your organization. Now, here's the stats that prove all this, right? If you look at Amina, I have a client whose first name is Amina, okay, cool. Yes, Amina. Okay, so here's how we're moving the dial. Look at this. Offline only, right? $159 for offline donor for a donor value, long-term donor value. Then if you add offline, it jumps up to 301. And look at this. So this goes to prove to you, you should not dump print quite yet. it is 148. It drops even below just offline. And then when you add in a full multi-channeled approach, we're seeing a 211% higher annual value of a donor at 494. Okay, so if that isn't proof enough, then take a look at their retention stats, and those will blow your mind as well, right? 43% donor retention, and we all know, right, like that 43% is indicative of what it is in the United States and around the globe. That 43, I say to people, if I actually had a client this morning that I spoke to whose donor retention was like around 30%. Boo-hoo, even worse, right? But if you lost more than half of your customers as a for-profit company, who out there is in the corporate world, you would like be out of business by like next week. Well, maybe not so dramatic, but I'm a drama queen over here. But you get the picture, right? So offline only at 43% for donor retention is a boo-hoo. Now, if you use offline with a valid email, that jumps up, donor retention jumps up to 56%. And then look at what happens to online only. If you cut out the print version, it's 36%. And then multi-channeled, your donor retention skyrockets to 67%. So if that is not enough reason to use a multi-channel approach, or the fact that COVID came in and caused a disruption, there's no better time than now. So here in Australia, we talk about what are called donor journeys, right? And so what is a donor journey? It is a unique fundraising experience tailored to each donor. Now, this is really no different to what we would do offline, but now we're talking about doing this online. So what we know is for a donor, their relationship with you as an organization is much more than just that one transaction. So building a journey involves taking a donor on a journey and sharing with them a story. So it's leading a donor from that initial point of contact through a story, right? And then building up to, guess what? Drum roll, the ask, right? So taking them from awareness, and we'll go through the stages from that initial contact to sharing with them on a journey, a story, and building up to an ask. And it's about providing through a multi-channel approach, hence why I started with multi-channel, some consistent and positive encounters. How many of you have ever seen a donor journey map in the flesh, or almost in the flesh, right? Type into the questions or into the chat box, because that's what my eyeball's looking at. Linda here says no. Who else? Yes or no? Have you ever seen? No. Never. No, no, no. Oh, Jacob, yes. He's the defier. Look at all these folks. No, no, no. Who else is out there? Karen, yes. Raised your hand. You can also raise your hand. Look at that. Anyone else? All right. I was blown away when I came to Australia, and I took a whole day's workshop on how to build a donor journey map, right? Like, this is crazy. This blew my mind. So from a digital perspective, this is absolutely essential to think about the kind of journey that you think that your prospective donor is going to be looking for when they encounter you, and in this case, in the digital sphere, because that's how you want to take your multi-channeled approach and align it to create a cohesive donor journey. Now it all starts, and I'm giving you the full day workshop in like 5 minutes. So and you get to keep this map as part of the recording and part of the slides. But it all starts with developing a donor persona. Like, who are the members of your target audience? In this case, we identified one particular audience segment as a rational boomer. So someone who, maybe had a channel preference of online versus offline. And we kind of characterized and said they were, look here, empty nesters, probably financial well-off professionals. They have money, that they're looking to donate, the time to dedicate to their charities of their choice. And so you develop this donor persona because, of course, hence, that's why I asked how many of you were advertising, because you want to bring them into your you want them to become aware of who you are. So in order to do that, you need to determine who are we trying to attract into our sphere or our funnel, as I'll talk about it later. Then you see the stages down there of anyone in the corporate world will recognize the stages of awareness, consideration, research, intent, and then we get them to the buy, right? Like we get them to that first gift. So we want to attract them into our sphere. And so maybe that is by, maybe they see a direct an ad on TV, right? So, they become aware of us. They learn about our organization in that way. Or maybe they see our Facebook ad, and that's how they become aware of us. And then we stop and they think, well, what is it that we want? What is our goal with someone at this stage in the journey? Well, maybe we want them to become intrigued, right? So maybe we want them to, move from awareness to the next phase of consideration. So how do we move them to that next phase? Well, maybe it is, in this case, they watch a video on, one of our videos on a YouTube channel. Now they're like, oh, I want them to feel inspired. That's the end result. So they watch that video and now they're feeling inspired. They're considering us. And then, okay, so now I've got to, okay, who is this group? Now I've got to do a little bit more research. So maybe they're going to want to, check out your Charity Navigator rating. So that's where you'll take them on this journey. So maybe you'll share with them a link to your rating on Charity Navigator, whatever, right? And so now you're helping them to move to the next step, which is, oh, maybe this is a charity that I'd like to make a gift to, intent, right? And so this is where they get to that first point of making a decision, right? And so maybe you'll use something like Facebook retargeted ads, like you'll go back to them and you'll drive them back to your landing page to get them to make that gift or to some content that you're sharing. And then you have them make their first gift. But do you see how you take them from the state, you develop a donor persona, and you take them from awareness to consideration to research to intent, bam, donation. But each stage of this, you are looking like, you're looking at what's my goal for the stage, intrigued, inspired, confused, pleased, whatever. I could probably someday, and if you're ever interested, type into the questions box, I could probably do a whole workshop on creating a donor journey, right? Like just sharing with you, how do you actually sketch this out from soup to nuts without this high level 30,000 foot view of it, right? So what does it mean to know your donors? Well, we know that not all donors are alike. And we can't treat everyone, even digitally, we cannot do that anymore. We cannot put them in the same kinds of buckets, right? Because we have to know who they are and what motivates them in order to understand their charitable behavior and in order to put together a strong donor journey mapping. So what are some of the charitable behaviors? How often do they donate? How much do they donate? When are they most likely to donate? And then from there, we can build out this donor persona. Someone said this is never a stupid question, anybody out there, right? Vicky says, how do we know this is the donor journey rational boomers take? We don't. We really have to sit there and put ourselves in. This is a very donor-centric process. So sitting down and saying, if I were a rational boomer, what would it be that I would be looking for? Right? So how do you know when you've hit the nail on the head? That's by going back and looking at how each step of the process is going once you get your donor journey up and running, looking at analytics and then optimizing. But it really is a very, very donor-centric process to try to determine how would a rational boomer, in this case, respond. And then you just map out each step from the beginning to the end. And as you sit down and do this, you may see gaps in your digital donor development process. As I just said, don't let the organizational goals dictate. Try to put yourself in the place of what experiences is my donor persona, what they may be looking for. And it's not all about getting them to the gift. It's about taking them on a positive donor journey experience so that they feel so good that giving, like when it happens like in real life, offline, through a major gift process, that they are so ready to give, that you've calculated out. Bingo, Claudia, great point. Surveying potential donors to develop donor journeys. Absolutely, right? You may actually want to do some surveys of prospective donors. As part of this process, you can do that. So be sincere. Now, I'm going to meld this because I should have started this with this funnel first. I love this concept. Okay, how many of you out there have heard of the sales funnel or the customer journey in the for-profit world? How many of you out there? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Once upon a time, I said, no way can you say to me that fundraising is like sales, right? Like how many of you are like, oh yeah, you can't do that. No, we're so different than sales, right? Well, okay, let's just think about it differently. How do you get all of the prospective donors out there? How do you get all of this prospective donors out there to become aware of you? Like you're sitting out there in this digital sphere and you're like, oh, wow, there's got to be people going by my website. But how do you actually make them aware? Well, in the for-profit world, there is something called a sales funnel. Do you see all those little characters out there? And you see like the megaphone and the whatever those little people symbols, right? So, right, like they're all sitting out there and we want them into our funnel. We want them to become aware of us. How many are like, yes, we do, right? Like just type in, yes, I want more prospective donors to enter into my funnel. So this sales funnel is I see all the yeses. Raise your hands too. Light up my screen, right? Like make it so I can't, make it so I can't see anymore, right? So what we want to do is we want to fill the funnel, get people into our donor journey where we're going to use these multiple multi-channel touch points. But how the heck do we get them into the funnel, right? So this is a for-profit sales concept where this is really a visual representation of how a consumer enters in their initial contact. And you'll notice that it is wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. There's no doubt about it because you're going to have many prospects out there, but not everyone is going to finish the journey with you, right? And the idea is that we push them into the next phase of that awareness, into consideration, into intent, into making a decision. So by the time we get to the bottom of the funnel, this is very transactional, and I don't like to be transactional, but the graphic seems to work. They've made a decisions and they're donating. How many of you are like, whoa, this is cool, right? So there are going to be people who fall out, and I'm like cool with that. I'm like, okay, that's great. If you identified and said to me that you are not a good fit and you drop out, guess what we call that in the major gift world? What do we call that? Type into the questions box, someone quickly. What do we call it when someone drops off and they're not a good fit for us in our major gift portfolio? Anyone? What's that step of the process? Qualification, right? How many of you are like, yes, qualification, I knew that. So basically what we're doing as we're taking them through this donor funnel or sales funnel is we're qualifying them. So they come into the top of the funnel, remember that donor journey map, and they become aware of us. And I'm going to share with you in a few minutes, how do we get them to become aware of us? Like you're probably all wondering, okay, so how do we get them to get into the funnel? Like, how do we even get them to notice us out of all the charities out there, right? And then you're going to push them down into, remember the next step in the donor journey? Interest in research, right? And then after we get there, guess what? Decision, right? So decision time. So the top of the funnel, let me go through each of these stages, right? Top of the funnel, way up here, okay, right? So this is where someone learns about you and they're going, oh, wow, this is a cool not-for-profit. I think I may like them, right? And so let me find out more about them. Or you may actually give them content so that they do find out about you intentionally. That's called a lead magnet. And we're going to talk about lead magnets in a moment. But this is where they kind of find your content and they go, oh, wow, this is interesting. Who are these folks? Like I just found someone before this webinar called the Miracle Mums here in Australia. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Who are they? Right. And so I went right to their donate page because they intrigued me. So that's what you want to do. Your intent here is to get them, right? Ah, Claudia, good point. Funneling allows more loyal recurring donor. Yes. The idea is you want to take people from not knowing who you are to knowing who you are and turning untapped, Simone Joyaux in America would say, suspects or just people out there into potential prospects. Now they've entered your funnel. Can you envision this? We're in the funnel now. What happens next? Okay, they go to that next step on your donor journey, and that's they want to research who you are. Okay, so maybe they're going to look for some more information, take more in-depth look at you. Is this group, worthy of my support? So maybe you want to share up to them some success stories. Remember the Charity Navigator, testimonials, share with them your annual reports, some FAQs, some videos, right? Here's who we are. Here's how we're changing lives. This is why you should consider us. We're at the consideration research point. Case studies, yes. Impact, yes. So giving most often is a personal and emotional decision. So impact, stories. Why should a donor give to your organization rather than another similar one? This is where another marketing term, another sales term, what is your unique selling proposition? What makes you different from everyone else? USP what makes you different than everyone else in the same cause sphere? Meaning, like you could be in the homeless arena. However, there's 10 different charities. So what makes you different? So that's where you want to serve this up, right? And you want to think carefully about how you communicate that. Your job is to make this information easily and readily available, right? USP, absolutely, Amina, did I get it? Yes, USP is unique selling proposition. And Toby's got a great resource in there for you right now. The Keela Storytelling Toolkit to Communicate Impact. Check that out. Nice dovetail. Great. There's a link in the chat box. So don't go check the link out and leave this presentation, however. Don't do that. because we still have the most important thing that I get so excited about that I want to talk about in a minute. So at this stage of the customer journey, you want to take people from prospects to potential donors, right? Okay, so we've got them almost at the potential donor stage. Now the bottom of this is the decision-making process, the bottom of that funnel where we saw that change coming out. So this is where a donor decides to make a decision, or maybe you force the choice for them to make a decision. So you're going to place a donate button somewhere very visible, or maybe even just send them an email with an ask in it at this point, right? And so make sure that it's visible, it's, can be seen. So at this point, the ask is served up, and hopefully, this person, you've taken them on enough of a multi-channel donor journey that they get to the point that they are going to answer your call with a donation, right? They're just going to give. Now, see how I'm stepping back? So how do we get people into the funnel, right? Like, how many of you are wondering out there, how do I get them to become aware of my organization? Isn't that the biggest problem? Yay or nay? Raise your hand. Yay or nay? Isn't that the biggest problem, to get them to learn about who you are? I see Caroline, Anna, who else? No one else? Oh, come on, right? Like, we're wondering. I say to groups, when I meet with them and talk about this topic and do some coaching, I'm like, tell me, when was the last time you looked at your Google Analytics? Oh, never. Okay, that's one answer. But so I'll say, so how many people, unique visitors, do you have visiting your website on a monthly basis? 3,000. 3,000? Okay, so how many of those are actually signing up for something like your newsletter? Newsletters are boring, by the way. We don't want to sign up for them anymore. We need more than that. We need something of value to exchange content for, okay? So how many of you are like, wow, yeah, 3,000, and I converted like 2 last month to sign up for my newsletter? Okay, right? Like, how many of you are like, we need to think differently about this, right? Amen. Isn't a first gift conversion just the beginning of a donor journey? It is, because once, Jacob, they give that first gift, guess what we do? We put them into a whole other journey, don't we, Jacob? Right? Don't we? So it is just the beginning about how we think about this. So lead generation for donor acquisition. So lead generation is this process where we take people and convert them from prospects into donors using things such as lead magnets. How many of you have heard or have actually signed up for something that turned out to be a lead magnet? Emily, me, right? Me all the time, right? So that is something of value to the prospect, so much value. Yeah. So guess what, Emily? And then get all the emails. Donor journey, customer journey, right? So it's exchanging something of such value that someone says, I have to have that, whatever it is. So I'm going to give my email address. It's no longer just an email newsletter, right? Boring, right? Like, done with that. So I think about, like, here in Australia, I saw a lead magnet on Facebook, and it was Royal Fly Doctor Service. It was a quiz on snake bites. And so I'm deathly afraid of snake bites. So I was like, oh my goodness, I have to take this quiz. So what did I do? I signed up, took the quiz, went through it. And at the end of the quiz, there was like this PDF version of download this flyer to learn about what to do when you get different snake bites, right? So what did they do? They got my email address through the quiz and the PDF, and then put me into a donor journey. So it has to be something, whether a survey, a petition, a guide, a course, something that will get you to exchange enough of a impetus to exchange an email address, right? What is a good approach for quizzes? Just make them in-house, or is there someone doing these? You can easily just do them. You could create a survey in-house these days. Absolutely. But then again, you could have a full service marketing company do that for you. Must be available to digitally download and must be engaging of it. So what is this a good defense against? Donor attrition, right? It's part of a healthy donor retention initiative. And in this case, it is such a low cost donor acquisition method, right? So what happens? So what is some of this touchly time point? What's a touch point? So it's any marketing contact or interaction between the organization and the donor. So you can serve up, blog, emails, whatever. And as we mentioned, this is part of this donor journey mapping. And so I recommend that you incorporate multiple touch points. Once they take your lead magnet, they enter up into your funnel, and you're going to start them, as Jacob said, on the first donor journey, right? Like first, right? And so you're going to touch them both online and offline in multiple ways. And it's crucial for the timing of that, right? So this is the schedule. Remember the donor journey mapping. You schedule these out. You determine when you should, and again, it's all optimization. You're going to look at your analytics and determine, okay, here's our basic map, but how are people responding? And then make adjustments based upon your analytics. But you have to start with a plan, right? That's the first thing. And you need to capture each interaction and look at the analytics behind each of those interactions to determine optimization of this. Now, I say there's something called, and I'm going to talk about how do we actually look at, what are some tools we can look at to optimize these interactions. But the halo effect can be defined in two ways. Number one, it's that creation of a positive perception of the organization by all these touchly time points. Okay, so that means that someone is going to feel good. Don't we know that donors want to feel good by their giving, okay? And so by creating all of these touch points that help a donor to feel good, that's what's going to do it. Now, also, the halo effect can refer to all of these multi-channeled ways that we're reaching someone. And let's say someone gets your direct mail and then they get your email, then they're going to remember that and go, oh, I forgot to respond to that direct mail piece. So that's how it can create this halo effect as well. But what we know is it's that right content delivered in the right way at the right time, which is the same thing. Isn't this all the same thing, in major gifts when we take this offline? Right, but it's thinking about structuring our digital efforts online to replicate the same process, isn't it? How many of you are going like epiphany, right? Like, oh, wow, aha, right? This is it. This is all we're doing. Don't we create a funnel with our major gift work? We identify prospects, qualify them, bring them on a cultivation process, and then make the ask. And then, as Jacob suggests, put them into a second funnel called stewardship, stewarding the gift. How many of you are like, yeah, okay, I get it. This is much more than just like putting a social post up or running a Facebook ad, because you can run Facebook ads to your lead magnet and then do retargeting and all of that. And I actually have an extended version of this webinar that goes an hour and a half that looks at step by step, how do you do all of those strategies. So leverage the halo effect, be active, stay connected, build this brand with strong messaging, so forth and so on. But a multi-channel approach boosts that halo effect. So many of you are like, okay, what do I recommend as a low-cost lead magnet for an arts organization? Art, right? Some kind of artwork that someone can download. Geez, wow, right? Like, tell me more about your arts organization and we can refine that lead for you, right? But art would be my like, wow, download this unique, whatever, coloring thing, right? You can color, or you can, I don't know, have this free print from us, Bingo, right? Like that would be great. So people say to me, well, how do I know if I'm getting this right? Test, 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 test. I have clients, we pull out their analytics. We look at how many people opened an email in that donor journey sequence. We looked at the response rate. We looked at how many people moved on to the next email, how many people dropped out, was it the timing, was it the messaging, what was the click rate, what was the open rate. Maybe we've got something really wrong. But what I know is, and this is where it gets very analytical, what gets measured improves, right? So that's how you're going to optimize that. And so justify your investment in, and that's also how you're going to justify, right? The people are going to be like, why are you spending money on a Facebook ad driving people to a lead magnet? Okay, because you can show in your Facebook ads or whatever ads, how many of those leads were actually converted. So, so this is how you're going to provide that data to reinvest in digital and lead acquisition and customer journeys as an opportunity to reinvest, right? Okay, and it's also how you're going to measure the success of your donor acquisition or your donor journey process. If you don't look at the data, how are you going to know how to optimize? So there are various tools that I can recommend to you to look at to leverage this behavior, to look at this behavior in terms of whether or not your multi-channel approach is being successful. Number one, of course, always keep your eye on the prize with donor metrics. And then there is these automated analytical tools that you can use. Surveys, who mentioned surveys out there, right? Surveys is another one. So what are some key metrics to be looking at as you go through this process, right? There are like 4 that I recommend for a healthy development program. So what are they, right? In your donor database, your CRM is going to be extremely useful at looking at collecting this data and analyzing it. So yes, you need to develop a baseline from which to measure from. It's like going to your doctors and saying, I need to know if I'm sick or not. And he's going to say, well, I have no idea. We needed to take your blood pressure and do all your baseline metrics, right? So doing your blood pressure, your blood work, all of that, that's where you get your baseline. So first you want to start with, well, where am I at right now? So analyze your data file right now and determine, according to those metrics, where are you? Because once you start to implement the stuff that we talked about in this webinar, then you want to start to measure against those particular metrics. And you may also want to define a goal for each of them. So like, I want to move donor acquisition up 25% in the next year. Okay, that's a big goal. How are we going to do that? And how do we measure whether or not we've attained that? And also, again, how do you optimize your donor journeys? And how do you compare against industry standards? Because you should also be benchmarking against what are the open rates, what are the click rates, what are all of that, okay? So what are some of those key metrics? Well, we definitely know growth in revenues. If after going through this process, you are raising more money, that is the eye on the prize, isn't it? So benchmark yourself in comparison to Giving USA, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, all of those kinds of things, or in your country, whatever, whatever that may be, the Pareto report in Australia, or what have you. So keep pace with overall trends. Another key metric, hey, if we go through all of this and we're not acquiring new donors, what do we do this for? Because as we know, we are naturally losing donors per year, somewhere in the realm of about 10%. So the number of new donors acquired becomes important, as well as the number of donors retained, because we know that we have a retention crisis in this country, in all countries, really, I'm sorry. And then how many donors are we upgrading? So once they leave that first conversion funnel where they move from unknowing you to becoming a prospect to giving, then putting them into another donor journey to upgrade their giving from their first gift to their second gift becomes important. And then, as someone mentioned, these funnels are so important to increasing the number of gifts or reoccurring gifts per donor. So how many, what is the number of annual gifts per donor? And we should have funnels that work on increasing that as well, right? But looking at our optimization of our donor journey, Google Analytics tracks donors across both your website and social media. How many of you look at your Google Analytics on at least a monthly basis to see what's trending in me? Okay, who else out there? Raise your hand. Jaden from Vancouver, awesome. Who else? Jadine. Who else out there? Anyone? Okay, how many of you don't? Fess up, type no into the questions box. Anna doesn't. Anyone else? Okay, right. Okay, yeah. So using pixel tracking. How many of you do Facebook tracking and use pixel tracking to look at someone's behavior across multi-platforms and then retarget, right? So you could have someone that enters your funnel and then you're going to retarget to them once they're in there. How many of you actually do pixel tracking? I look at how long someone stayed. I look at their traffic source, their browser, look at all of those analytics. And then there are things like, you have automated dashboards. Your CRM can tell you a lot of data depending upon the CRM system that you have. But if you don't have a sophisticated CRM, well, Keela is one, right? Duh. You can take that and slice and dice some of that information in Excel. Keela is awesome. It really is. I was so impressed when I first learned about it. And then, of course, my CRM email applications, Keela can track analytics. There are things like heat maps, right, that look at people's behavior on your website. Where are they first going to? What are they clicking on? Surveys you can do. Emily says we use Keela too. It's definitely been life-changing. So looking at demographic information, giving potential donor interest. And this is where you can refine your donor persona, right? Like someone mentioned that in the beginning. And then, using all of that to modify your donor journeys. So taking your results, looking at your open rates, looking at all of that and modifying it. I say you should be doing this process at least weekly, optimizing, taking your learnings and optimizing your strategy at least weekly, and apply this information to your website, adjusting banners. Like if you're looking at heat maps and seeing that someone isn't responding on a certain way, you can adjust that. You can, if someone's downloading more blogs and articles, maybe you put a lead magnet on one of those blogs that's highly popular, looking at the types of content that's being downloaded, and then, looking at where donation buttons are, and then ad optimization. If you are here in Australia, digital fundraising is huge. And some organizations will spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on an ad campaign, and they will run multiple versions of an ad, testing imagery, testing stories, testing audiences, and optimizing based upon the insights that they are getting on a sometimes daily basis. And looking at, organic versus paid, and how videos are performing, and videos and ads, right? So testing that versus static content. And then adjusting your landing page where someone actually lands to pick up your lead, and determining how is the click rate, how is that trending, and then, making more optimizations. Search engine optimization is another tool. However, I rely on it far less these days than actually driving traffic through advertising, through targeted ads and retargeting it ads, and using specialized audience. So I will actually load up a client or a donor file into Facebook and retarget right to my donor file. And so you can do that and create lookalike audiences to find prospects who look like your current donors, and target and retarget towards them as well. So that was a lot of content. So we looked at how do we actually, what is multi-channel? Why is it so important? And how do you actually use it to build out a donor journey? We took a wide overview look at donor journeys, why they're important. I kind of went through this all backwards. And then we talked about how do we get people into your donor journey through using lead magnets. And then we talked about having some real touch lead time points during that donor journey. And then the importance of analyzing all of this data to say, do we have our audience right? Do we have our lead magnet right? Do we have our donor journey right? But this, my friends, really only skims the surface of a much larger topic of lead magnets, donor journeys, and optimization. Each one of those could be an hour workshop in and of itself. So I've covered a lot of territory. I would love to stop here. We have about 5 or so minutes, and I would love to hear from you. How are you going to take some? People have said to me, this is so dense. I don't even know where to begin or what have you. But what information, what 1 or 2 things are you going to take back to your office that maybe actually you'll start to implement right away? Or what was one of your greatest aha moments? So I'll just stop there and see what we have. Let's see here. Am I coming back? Don't know how to look at this technologically unsavvy. There we go. So we have
Robin, that was amazing. Like, you are such a ball of energy. You're so great. That was like the most engaging webinar I think I've been on in a really long time. So thank you so much.
Oh, this is cool. Like, look at everyone. Thank you. Measurement. Carolyn is saying building donor journey map. Like, I could just do a whole workshop on how to build out that donor journey. That was like a 60,000 foot look at it. And Emily says, I download enough myself. Ha ha ha, right, Emily? But have you ever thought about like how that works? That same concept works for not-for-profits instead of just the for-profits, right? Oh, now I do. Cool. Okay, Ludwig says, what is a decent sample size to test your funnel process? Well, I say, I would say, gosh, at least 50 names, but 100. If you can fill your funnel with 100 or 1,000, even more, the better. The more people you have, the more data you're going to have. We're looking to gate our content. Maybe that's a great lead magnet. Absolutely. Our podcast and video. Great. Lead magnets. Who said this? Lead magnets, game on. Anything else? Are we missing anything? Building donor journey map. Do you think it's important enough to learn about SEO? I think it certainly is. Keywords in your blogging, your content, having fresh content on your website. So people are always, Google's always, what do they call that? When it's kind of scanning it for new keywords. What would you recommend from a subject line viewpoint to improve our open rates, suggesting donation ask or the contrary? Subject lines are crawling. Thank you. Subject lines are important. I say test, test, test. Intriguing. Really, here's a sales guy. I follow for-profit sales too much, but I think there's a lot to be learned about for-profit sales and not-for-profit. So there's a guy, he's just totally spammy to me, but Russell Brunson, he writes some of the most oddest email lines that make you like, what? So that you stop and you open them, right? So don't use the please, please give to change a child's life. Use something like something shocking that will get them to just open up the emails, but test. You can run a test and say, let's use this one email subject line. Let's use this shocker and see how they test. That's the only way you're going to know. Does this co-schedule? Love co-schedule. Tell you how engaging I can't keep up with the Zoom comments.
I know, everyone's so engaged. You've inspired everyone, Robin.
Right? How many asks a year? How often are good practice from a cadence? I say for asks, have 3 non-asks and 1 ask. 3 non-ask, 1 ask. That's a good cadence. Anyone else having feedback on cadence? And then Jacob here in the Q&A, how does the donor journey vary from major donor versus smaller gift donors or reoccurring donors? That's a great question. So I would say, for major donors, I would say, are they prospects? Are they major donors? That's going to vary, right? And smaller gift donors, for me, it's just relative. If we're talking digital, it's about just the gift amount, but the process is the same. I don't know if that helps. Touch points between one donation to the next on average in ideal situation. Well, they say in sales, it takes 7 touch points for 1 sale. So, I would think a multitude of them, at least 3 to 1 is what I recommend as a minimum. 3 non-asks to 1 ask as a minimum. Wow, we're up for time. We could go on and on and on, I think. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, there's so many questions coming in, but I honestly think you've pretty much answered all of them, which is so impressive. So thank you, Robin. That was honestly truly amazing.
I love Karen's comment here about not-for-profits and for-profits both lose customers because the communications are too often irrelevant or unrewarding. That is a great point, and that's why I say test, 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 because guess what? I said this to a client. She said, we're sending a newsletter bi-weekly, and so I said to her, test, look at your analytics. Are you having a lot of drop-offs? And she said, you know what, Robin, we went back and we looked at our analytics, and yes, our drop-off rate took a steep dive. Our click rate took a steep dive. So we're backing off and we're moving to once a month email newsletters. So again, whoever said that comment, I forget who it was, absolutely test, test, test. That is the name of the game for optimization. So sorry, Mel, go ahead, close out the webinar.
No, that's great. So such valuable information, honestly. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I knew this webinar was going to be amazing, and you did not disappoint. Cool. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for being so engaging. Like, everyone has just been so phenomenal in this chat group. So thank you all so much. And before we do sign off, though, I just want to mention that there is a quick 3-question survey at the end of the presentation. It'll just pop up as soon as the webinar is over. And I'm sure Robin would love to hear all of your feedback. We also love to hear the feedback. We'll definitely share it with Robin once everything's done. Cool. And lastly, I just wanted to remind you all that our next session will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, led by Keela's very own Tazzy Gottsleg. So it's kind of actually a perfect webinar right after this one, because we're going to jump into measuring impact and talking all about KPIs. So Robin kind of touched on that at the very end of hers. So I think it's a great kind of segue into Tazzy's. And yeah, if you haven't already signed up for that, Toby just popped that into the chat there. And hopefully we'll all see you there tomorrow.
Great. Awesome. See you later, everyone.
Again, Robin.
Bye.
Take care.